It's Saturday, February 11th, 2023. I'm watching CBS this morning. It's Saturday morning, CBS Saturday mornings, which is different, or morning with no S. And it's E6. In this piece, they do something on George. They have a highlight or spotlight of this George Santos. But the way they bring forth the story today, as they followed it, is different than what some of the local newscasts have done. So I'm going to put that up. And then there was a piece on this morning on Me TV, which is Channel 3, about about New Jersey politics. And I'm listening to this woman speak to try to learn, like, because I don't hear anything like that coming from New York. So I'm trying to learn what issues, and they're our neighbor, trying to figure out what the issues are there, since New York is not talking about it. And what's interesting is when I analyze what she says, she talks about, she says this word, proposition. And I'm like, now is that, if I break that word down, that's a PR opposition. And then if I tie it into the George Santos piece, which is borderline rumors and scandalous of sorts, I'm wondering, I heard someone refer to across the river, but I've heard across the pond. And then there's like, but I don't ever hear anybody say across the ocean. So I'm wondering why that is. So I'm listening, and it says something about a beach campaign. And I'm like, a beach campaign. Now, how is that relevant to where I'm trapped in New York under whatever has been working mysteriously throughout my life frame, where I'm stuck and a lot of different issues have happened with forced sin, almost like off into a ditch, but sin being off course, turning the degree ever so slightly. So then, like, however many knots in the future in topology, the entire whatever is off. Who would they be doing that for? Who across the pond or who across the river would have that level of indecency to harm my person during my season when I was a known star person? I was a known superstar, to have that superstar clockmaker, star maker within my foreseeable life frame, already designated as such. So that was to be protected and to foster the correct relationship. I have no idea how they've gotten away with harming my person for so long. So this is what the George Santos sounds like. There's somebody, because he's from the local area. Well, he's from Brazil, but then, which again, the Brazilian flag has this planetary thing on it. It's yellow and green. Not sure what that's all about, with this blue and white stars. Not sure, is that like an ally, an axis? Like, who would know these things with no access to anybody at the moment?
An icy exchange at the State of the Union this week when Utah Senator Mitt Romney confronted first-term New York Congressman George Santos. Romney telling Santos he does not belong in Congress. Santos has been caught in a web of alleged lies about his background since winning his election in November.
He says that he embellished his record. Look, embellishing is saying you got an A when you got an A minus. Lying is saying you graduated from college you didn't even attend, and he shouldn't be in Congress. And they're going to go through the process and hopefully get him out. And but he shouldn't be there.
Santos responded to Romney's criticism.
It's not the first time in history that I've been told to shut up and go to the back of the room, especially by people who come from a privileged background. And it's not going to be the last, and I'm never going to shut up and go to the back of the room. And I think it's reprehensible that the senator would say such a thing to me in the demeaning way he said. It wasn't very Mormon of him. That's what I can tell you. I'm not under any ethics investigation.
In that same exchange with reporters, Santos did not answer about whether his mother was in the World Trade Center on 9/11. That alleged falsehood is one of many Santos is accused of telling voters. Santos's rise to Congress and the controversy following his election is the subject of a new documentary by CBS Reports. In Campaign of Deceit, Caitlin Huey-Burns tracked through Santos's past to try to find some answers. She is here with more. Caitlin, good morning.
Good morning, Jeff. Well, we traveled throughout Santos's district on New York's Long Island, speaking to constituents, political insiders, journalists, and even acquaintances. And we even visited Brazil, where Santos once lived. But oftentimes, even when we found some answers, they often led to more questions.
Congressman, do you have a response to New York? We're still calling for you to step down?
Since the 34-year-old's congressional win, many of the stories Santos told on the campaign trail have been exposed as outright lies.
You have more Republicans from New York who are still asking you to step down.
George Anthony DeVolder Santos never worked at Citigroup. He was not worth $100 million when he was 30. We don't know for sure, but he probably wasn't a preferred buyer at Hermes. He didn't attend the Horace Mann School. His mother wasn't in the World Trade Center on 9/11. He wasn't the descendant of Holocaust survivors. He never went to Baruch College. And George Santos never won a volleyball championship.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
Grant Lally runs the North Shore Leader, the newspaper that, during Santos's campaign, published what was otherwise discussed only in whispers in Republican circles.
He began to be known as George Scamtos among those who paid attention.
George Scamtos.
Correct. My old campaign manager called me up out of the blue in the middle of this campaign, and he said, Grant, what is this? This is not a campaign. This is a beach party.
On hotels in Florida alone, Santos
Campaign. I just recently learned that as a Latin American, whatever, I had a J2 visa representative from Brazil, so I have no animosity against. I've only met one real, authentic Brazilian person, and she and I got along very well. She went to, I mean, again, it was whatever and whatever. So, but I'm listening to this in a beach kind of a way, beach party kind of a way, and I'm like,
Santos's campaign spent more than $11,000, part of the more than $3 million his campaign spent during his run.
We knew from his 2020 filings, he didn't have any money at all.
And then all of a sudden in 2022, he claims to have come into a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, that was really the moment that really hit us, that there's really something wrong here, was when his campaign finance filings claimed that he made a $700,000 loan to his campaign.
Prosecutors at the federal, state, and local level are now investigating. A watchdog group filed this complaint with the Federal Election Commission, questioning Santos's expenses and the source of the funds he loaned his campaign. Around the time he loaned that money, Santos was doing this.
Currently at Harbor City Capital, I manage a $1.5 billion fund, right? And I know how to manage it well.
Harbor City Capital. Before it was alleged to be a classic Ponzi scheme and shut down by the Securities and Exchange Commission, George Santos was the regional director in New York. He has said he wasn't aware of any wrongdoing.
After the federal prosecutors shut down Harbor City Capital, Santos formed new companies together with Nancy Marks down in Florida.
Nancy Marks. Who is she?
She was Santos's campaign treasurer. She filed all of his reports, which means she should have known whether they were true or false when she filed them as the treasurer, and she had that legal responsibility.
Hi, Nancy.
We reached out to Nancy Marks several times and never heard back. So we showed up at a meeting for a Long Island library where she serves as a board member. When we arrived, her seat was empty. So we knocked on the door where she runs her business. The lights were on inside, the political posters hung in the windows, but nobody came to the door. George Santos didn't lie only while running for Congress. We crisscrossed New York City and Long Island, digging into his past, and found a trail of bitterness. Women and men once close to Santos who say they've been burned by his falsehoods and betrayals.
Caitlin, as we saw there, welcome, first of all.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you, too. As we saw there, you tracked down a lot of leads. What else did you learn about George Santos?
Well, we know what's been out there and what we've been reporting, but we talked to people who knew him. And one compelling character was a woman who went to middle school with George Santos. And she said that he exhibited these characteristics from a young age, that he would exaggerate, fabricate to try to fit in, that he was bullied as a child and tried to fit in with these groups. And she sees a lot of parallels between the person she saw then and the person she sees now.
I know you reached out to him. He declined comment. But I mean, what does he say about this mountain of evidence against him?
Well, I do want to make clear, we have tried multiple times to ask him for an interview, and he declined. We caught up with him in the basement of the Capitol last week to ask him more questions, as you can see, and he wasn't responding to our questions. But here's the thing. He has said he is sorry for fabricating parts of his resume, but it is much more than that. He said that his mother was in the towers on 9/11 when she wasn't. He claimed his parents were Holocaust survivors. And when we talk to people in the district, those are the kinds of things that really hit them, because everybody in his district has a connection to 9/11, for example. And it just was kind of became personal.
And Caitlin, we know quickly here.
And it's amazing to me that they're able to make absolutely nothing. They're able to make absolutely like something and put these people in something of power when they don't even have the qualifications that they claim that they have, and they get away with all of these lies. But yet there are others that in like the field, let's just say as myself since beginning, that needed like spiritual uplift in order to get to whatever I was supposed to be a part of, that never got to where I needed to be. In fact, quite the opposite has happened. It's almost like it almost goes into like black hole theory with a cave-in of a place that needed to be uplifted and supported spiritually, and instead it was used in some other fashion that then started caving in other things. Again, don't know if it's tactical or strategy. I'm not an expert in that.
There's calls for him to resign, but is there any recourse? Because it doesn't seem like he's going to resign.
Here's the really interesting thing. You can't recall your member of Congress. And as much as his constituents want him to resign, they came to D.C. this week to try to force him out. Unless leadership moves, and they won't. They want the investigations to play out, and that's something to really keep an eye on here. But for voters, those are the people who are really disadvantaged in this
Just
situation.
have to vote him out. Thank you, Caitlin. And you can stream Campaign of Deceit tomorrow night at 8 Eastern on the CBS News app.
Unearthing the past.
So now I'm going to go over and listen to what an actual person from New Jersey is saying, who's also on the TV as a politician, supposedly. This is like the only references I have. She speaks of this high taxes, but a lot of spending going on in New Jersey, which again, in New York, I have no way of I wouldn't even know where to go or where to begin to examine records and things, but not part of the series of rooms I've been within. But she does talk about this education for the children that are like up and coming. And I'm just thinking back on my own life frame and where did like a door get possibly shut. And I'm thinking, there is this, like they talk about, like the education for the children in this system in order to keep residents and to keep the state running. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what about all, like, I mean, in New York, there's been like myself, for instance, who's been here, borderline trapped here, and then wasted here. Like talent that an asset or talent that could have been utilized in a different fashion or manner, but instead was wasted completely in opportunity. Um, it's so frustrating to like, I don't even know where to go and like how to, I mean, I don't know how to uplift my own spirit and get myself to a better what I deserve. I mean, like, I don't even know where to begin.
Forgotten corner of the world up next at once hidden church.
Major issues facing New Jersey is the high cost of living, and politicians are facing increasing pressure to do something about it. It is, after all, an election year. Joining me now to provide some insight into the issue is Rosemary Becky. She's president of Jersey First. It's good to see you, Rosemary. Thanks for coming on the show.
Great to see you, Laura. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so let's first, for people who may not be familiar with Jersey First, can you tell us a little bit about the organization you represent?
Sure. So Jersey First is an advocacy organization. And what we do is we talk about the issues that are facing hardworking New Jerseyans. And right now, we're very focused on the affordability issue. You know, New Jersey is so unaffordable at the moment. Our businesses can't afford to stay here, nor can our residents. And so we're really talking about the need for us to find some solutions here.
Yeah, so let's talk about what is driving the current affordability issue, right? There are jobs here, but then especially younger people, they can't afford to move in.
And like, here's the thing in New York, they keep talking on the television about these jobs, and I have spent hours on the stupid computer putting in applications with not even a single callback. So where do these applications go? What happened to employment agencies where you actually had a head hunter, a physical person in front of you, a gatekeeper? And if you didn't get somewhere with one of them, you could go to a different firm. What happened to those jobs? So there was actually like responsibility, and it didn't just go into the ether and then get redistributed in a mannerism that's in some secret fashion, which is not even trackable for the average person who needs the income, who needs the job.
But what is at the core that is driving this affordability issue?
So we think what's at the core of this issue is, number one, our taxes are too high, right? Not only are our corporate taxes the worst in the nation, but so are our income taxes as well as our property taxes. And then the other thing, and what's driving our high taxes, is the spending that's going on here in New Jersey. And we really need to scale it back. I mean, just like every family in this state, everybody needs a budget that they can live within. And so we think it's really important that we not only lower the taxes here in New Jersey, but we reduce the amount of spending that's going on.
Are there areas, and the governor hasn't presented his budget yet, but
And here's the thing, for the special whatever, like in my series of rooms, I saw on Facebook yesterday, they had like a line of a cartoon. It was a line of dogs going into obedience school. And then, of course, I sit on the fence because I'm like, well, one person's obedience school is another person's disobedience school, it would appear. So, I mean, I went into the building. Who was running the outfit? I don't really know. I mean, I was obedient to whoever was running the show. I just don't know who they are and how that could have had a like debilitating effect on my life.
Are there areas, and sometimes transparency is an issue. People will say, well, we don't know because we don't know what's being sent. But, what areas do you think are being mismanaged, or where is money going where maybe it shouldn't go? What are your thoughts?
I think it's just a general proposition here in New Jersey. I think that we fund too many programs. We've really just kind of need to take a hard look at what we're spending our money on and reduce those, decide what are priorities for New Jersey and spend our resources on that. We need to fully, fund our higher education programs so that our kids actually stay here in New Jersey and go to school here in New Jersey. I think that's, something that we ought to be doing, immediately. So,
And I don't understand, like, you make these investments in these kids in these states. Why is it not a lifelong educational system with jobs at the end of it for life sustaining curriculum in order to keep accountability at the state level? I really, it is such a sloppy and disorganized way of being and acting. It's so frustrating at a perfectionist level. And I'm not even like a career perfectionist, but like when I see this much inefficiency, I'm just like, ugh. I'm like, how does nobody else spot? Like, there has to be somebody else who spotted this.
and again, looking at ways that, look, we just can't afford all the programs we're doing and tighten the belt.
Yeah. Well, so, what are then the downstream effects? You're touching on a little bit, people aren't staying to go to college here because the colleges are even more expensive than what you get in some southern schools or other schools, other state schools. And even though you're in state here, it's cheaper to.
And then my other question is, are there, because there's this huge insurgency. I saw it when I was in Virginia of what they were like non-Virginia, like whatever, like their whole population demographic was. I'm like, I don't understand. Where I bought a house, it's however the neighborhood was set up, which is what I bought into. But then have these alternate school systems in I didn't understand how that was built. And then I'm wondering, is there some form, because in New York for a while, it seems to have been whatever, but it seemed to be like a lot of high price, expensive cars, driving all over the place, throughout the neighborhood. Don't know if they were really residents here or not. But there's almost this like, where are they getting all this money from? Is it foreign investment? Is it domestic investment? Are they supplementing like multiple residencies? Is that changing the outcome of other security concerns I have? I mean, there's a lot of pieces to this. I call it a ruzel just because a puzzle, there's two sides of the prong. So,
Or to go out of state. And that shouldn't be.
No, it shouldn't be. And, it was actually something when we did some research, actually back when Jersey first launched, and we took a look at our economy and what was happening in New Jersey. And one of the things that we saw was that all of our kids are going out of state for higher ed, and they're not staying here. And a lot of the reason behind that is because it's so expensive to stay here and go to college. And so what's happening is we give these kids these incredible K through 12 education, and then they leave the state and they don't come back until much, much later in their life, if at all.
Right. And what do you think is happening? Why aren't colleges? And I think we.
So now they have no roots. They're going to different states. They say it's in one territory, one country. So there's some kind of false sense of protection there. But this shuffling between states, and then there's no long-term roots. I know the roots that we had in New York, I mean, got shuffled away or lured away. Don't know how that happened. But there's very few of these like deep roots inside New York State at the moment and on Long Island. So now I'm confused. Where is the future headed when they've created this shuffle and the shuffleboard almost as like some kind of game in order to like take away some form of inherent protection that once existed?
We've touched on this before. When my daughter went through, her college application, the state schools weren't really reaching out to her. Did the state schools want the out-of-state tuition? What's going on? Do you know?
So one of the things you see a lot is the cost for our kids to stay in state is pretty much the same as if they were going out of state, or the cost for out of state students to come to New Jersey. And so there's not this real incentive for them to stay here. And so I think that has a lot to do with why they're leaving.
Yeah. Well, you recently wrote an op-ed. And it was about your view of the need to cut corporate tax, similar to how Pennsylvania did. So can you talk a little bit about what they did and how it might be applicable here and how it could help in New Jersey?
Yeah, I mean, fundamental to getting businesses here in New Jersey and businesses to stay is we've got to make it competitive. And, that's exactly what Pennsylvania did. They recognized that they needed to lower their corporate tax to do it. And they did it actually in a really responsible way. They looked at lowering the tax over a period of time, which again is something that could easily be done here in New Jersey. And our governor has said he is going to let.
And by all of this movement, also, it's caused this almost like sinkhole in the sense of I stayed here and got an education here, and the education I got, then they told me was useless, and they wouldn't hire me, and they wouldn't pay for my level of labor. I mean, on such a simplistic scale, that should be illegal, for certain. But yet, somehow they're getting away with it, and I'm not quite sure how. I went through day-to-day New York State level education, and then I get to the end, I get the diploma, and they tell me, they just push me out the door. And there's no guarantee of employment. And then there was a big upheaval, I hear, on the TV. They mention that then jobs went overseas. What does that even mean? Jobs. Now, is that the biblical reference to Job? Or are they talking about like monetary compensation in order to self-sustain? Because there's been no hand to hold. There's been no guide, mentor. And I have a clock issue, a biological clock issue with the future attached to me. So I don't understand how at any topiary level they're allowed to get away with this level of neglect and abuse of so many privileges. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken. And it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.